Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Ethan? What's wrong? You look like you've lost your best friend. Come on, it's a Christmas party. I flinched, startled, and looked up to find myself face to face with Allison, my best friend's wife, leaning toward me with a look of genuine concern, and a view that could have been distracting under other circumstances. "Oh, hi, Allison," I said, managing a weak smile. "Sorry, I guess I'm just not in much of a party mood tonight. Got a lot on my mind." Even as I said it, the weight of what I was planning, and how much it would hurt her, pressed heavier on me. Allison pulled out a chair and sat down beside me, her expression soft but insistent. "Come on, brighten up a little," she said, reaching out to touch my hand lightly. "Tell Aunt Allison what's bothering you." "It's nothing really," I replied, shaking my head. "Just mulling over some things I need to handle next week. Not exactly looking forward to it." "Come on, dance with me," Allison urged, her smile coaxing. "Look at Ryan and Stephanie. They're having the time of their lives out there. Why don't we give it a try? Who knows? Maybe we'll get just as many envious stares as they are." Her eyes sparkled mischievously as she leaned in closer. "Then, once I've worn you out on the dance floor, you can buy me a drink, and we can talk. There's something I need to ask you." I hesitated for a moment, but eventually, her persistence won me over. She led me onto the dance floor, and as soon as we started moving, she melted into my arms with an easy familiarity. It felt almost nostalgic, like we were back in high school, swaying together at one of those carefree sock hops. But I couldn't fully focus on Allison, no matter how natural it felt. My eyes kept darting toward Ryan and Stephanie, watching them laugh and twirl in each other's arms. Every step we took together reminded me of the painful truths I had uncovered and the intricate plans I had laid to deal with them. As we moved to the music, my mind raced with the bitterness of betrayal and the cold determination to set things right on my terms. When we married, Stephanie and I were deeply in love, and lust just like most couples. Unlike most, it had continued for years, and until our last 4th of July party, I had assumed it would continue until one of us died. Well, at least the children were through college and settled in good careers. What was about to happen would hurt them, but since they were adults, they could better handle it. Like most men who discover their wives were cheating, I never saw it coming. I wondered if I would still be happily ignorant of the problem if I hadn't overheard my sister-in-law and one of her and Stephanie's friends gossip at the Independence Day party. We had the party at our home on our small acreage because we had a small stream running close to the house. There was a nice swimming hole about 150 feet from the house. I kept the yard mowed up to it and had built a shelter and barbecue grill beside it. Many happy days were spent there until the day. Almost all our friends and many of the neighbors were in attendance. We had way more guests than I had anticipated, so I had gone back to the house for supplies. I was standing in the pantry when I overheard the two women talking outside the hallway bathroom. I still get almost sick at my stomach thinking about what I heard that day and what I had seen later. Sharon, Stephanie's sister, laughed and told Paulo no. "Ethan is so dumb he never suspects a thing. Steph can tell him anything and he believes her. We have an agreement that I am with her, or she is with me if either of our men asks." She laughed again and continued, "Of course, most of the time we're with one of our friends, not each other. What our doofuses don't know won't hurt them now, will it? Just look at how much time Steph spends with Ryan at these parties, and neither of them even suspects a thing. They dance and play around and Ethan and Allison just ignore it. Steph says Ryan is so much better than Leo was. She really dreads having to move on when Ethan or Allison start getting suspicious and she has to quit seeing Ryan." I still remember the shock of overhearing that conversation. I spent the rest of the evening watching Stephanie and Ryan. I was trying to convince myself that what they were doing was innocent. I began adding things up in my mind, seeing their actions in a different light. I mean, Ryan and I had been best friends since before beginning grade school. He and I, Allison and Stephanie, grew up together. Surely, he wouldn't screw me this way. Then I had the irreverent thought. He wasn't screwing me, just my wife. He was just shafting me, his best friend. Sure, we had grown apart a little while I was away from our small town in the military. I had spent 26 years in the Army before retiring and moving back home 2 years ago. Ryan, on the other hand, had gone away to college and then returned home to open his own business. He was now a very big duck in our small 5,000-plus population puddle of a town. Well, that was soon to change. I had called in some favors from some of my military friends. I also put to use some of the skills I had thought I would never use after retiring. We were getting a little surprise ready for my loving wife Stephanie and her friend Ryan. Like most men in this situation, after I had accepted the hurt and gotten partially over the sickness of the betrayal, I began planning for the end. Like a lot of men, I didn't immediately confront the perpetrators of this adultery. I gathered evidence, planned my attack, and prepared for as many foreseeable outcomes and counterattacks as I could. I had enlisted the aid of one of my retired military friends, now a powerful attorney in a town not far from where we lived early on. I carefully followed all his legal advice as I began planning my moves against Ryan and Steph. Of course, he was the divorce attorney too, and we planned well for that also. While I was remembering what started my slide into this dismaying mental state, I quit paying so much attention to my dance partner. I was glaring so hard at Steph and Ryan I stumbled. Allison looked up into my face, and I saw her start. She then followed my gaze, and a troubled look came over her face. "Ethan?" She stopped dancing and took my hand, looking into my face. "Oh my God. You know, don't you? How long have you known?" she asked as she led me toward the door to the balcony. I followed her in a trance, and as we neared the edge of the balcony, she turned to me. I could see the tears in her eyes. "I have suspected for some time, but I only got the proof on them last week," Allison said. "What about you? When did you find out, and why didn't you tell me?" "I was going to tell you what I knew tonight. What are you going to do now?" I felt my chest tighten, and I had trouble speaking. Allison, I am so sorry," I said. I am going to ruin him and dump that woman just as soon as I finish planning my attack. I have been waiting, trying to set things up so you didn't get hurt too badly by collateral damage. I just wasn't sure how to proceed without hurting you too much." Allison's hand came out to caress my face. "Oh, Ethan, honey, just do what you have to do. I know you wouldn't hurt me for the world. I've known since grade school. I just wish." She stopped and ran back into the hotel crying. I stood there with my mouth hanging open, then almost doubled up as a pain tore through my gut. I had remembered the scene I witnessed the 4th of July after I pretended to get so drunk I had to go to bed early. I was leaning over the railing throwing up when Stephanie came looking for me. She thought I was drunk and began giving me hell for embarrassing her in front of our friends. I looked at her in disgust and went around the side of the hotel, hearing her voice fading into the distance. I walked around a few minutes and then went in the front door. I found our hostess and told her I was ill and had to go home. I asked if she could see Stephanie got home. I was pretty sure Ryan would bring her home when he was finished with her, but it never hurts to be positive. Oh, wait. I think Allison left and took his car when she left. Oh, shucks. I stepped out under the hotel portico and let my mind once again remember some of the painful things my friends and I had discovered over the last 6 months. I stood there thinking about the videos some friends had obtained from surreptitiously placed spy cameras. I also remembered some pictures I had taken on the day I discovered Stephanie's infidelity. I had given Stephanie every chance to prove me wrong, and what did she do? As soon as she could get alone with Ryan after she was sure I had safely passed out from drink that July 4th, she had let him screw her. She could hardly get up and walk after their session. I could hear them in the guest room that day. As soon as they were well into their cheating, I had slowly cracked open the door. My wonderful Steph was flat on her back with my ex-buddy was having sex with her. After he was done, he leaned forward and tenderly kissed her. It was all I could do not to rush into the room and tear him apart. The main reason I didn't was because I wanted an even more painful revenge. I just finished taking the pictures, then slowly and softly closed the door and returned to bed. After pretending to sleep for a few minutes that day, I had staggered back to the party and looked up my wife and Ryan. I moved between them and hugged Steph. "Hey baby, I love you. Why don't we go somewhere for a few minutes and have some fun?" I was laughing inside as I watched Stephanie blush and get her furious look. "Ethan, you've had way too much scotch tonight. Now just behave yourself and maybe you'll get lucky tomorrow." "Well, gee Steph, you look like you could really use some good sex. I just didn't want you to have to settle for Ryan, so I thought I would make the offer." After I said that, Stephanie blanched and then said, "Oh you." She turned and walked away. Needless to say, even if I had wanted to touch her, I wouldn't have gotten to that night. July 5th, I began planning and contacting my friends. We had a steady stream of visitors during the summer, and each of them made a contribution in time and expertise. Some of them also made investments in a new company I had formed. One of the first things my friends and I began doing was buying shares of Ryan's computer consulting company. It was a closely held entity, and I had known for several years that some of the initial investors wanted to get rid of their shares. It seems Ryan had figured out how to make the profits disappear into his bank account. He paid himself and some of his friends he had on the payroll exorbitant salaries. My friends and I had signed a contract. Now, I know this wasn't completely legal, where they would each purchase enough shares to stay just under the legal reporting rules for majority ownership in a publicly traded company. The transactions were reported, but since Ryan didn't recognize their names, he just assumed nothing was amiss. My friends dutifully gave Ryan a proxy to vote at the annual meeting when he requested it. Of course, they then executed another proxy after that date and gave it to me. The end result was that by year's end, we owned or had proxies for almost 73% of Ryan's company. Just before the end of the year, they all placed their shares in the small holding company I had formed and took company stock in return. The only shares I didn't own or control the voting right to were those Ryan, Allison, or his children owned. Ryan's annual meeting of shareholders was January 10th, and that would be his last day of employment and his last day of being respected in our town. My mind was dragged back to the present when I saw Allison enter the hotel lobby from the direction of the restrooms. Something twisted inside of me. At first I felt so damn sad. Then I knew I had to talk to her again. I re-entered the hotel and followed her through the lobby, down the hallway beside the conference rooms and out the side door. I watched her run toward the parking lot. Without thinking, I ran to follow her. By the time I reached the parking lot, her car was leaving. I quickly entered my car and went in pursuit. Thankfully, in a small town, there isn't much traffic late in the evening, and I could keep her in sight. She was going to her home as I halfway expected her to do, so I slowed down and followed at a more sedate pace. I followed Allison into her house and stood watching when she collapsed onto the bed, sobbing her heart out. I had always had a soft spot for my dear Allison. She might have been my wife if Ryan hadn't talked her into marrying him while I was off taking basic training so many years ago. We had been grade school friends and even dated some in high school. She had dated Ryan also, and after I had left became serious about him. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently gathered her into my arms. She looked up at me, wrapped her arms around me, and sobbed into my chest. I just held Allison, gently stroking her, giving what comfort I could as she finally cried herself out. I felt her push herself away from me and she said, "Oh, God. I'm so sorry, Ethan. You're hurting so, and all I can do is force my sorrow onto you. Oh, what are we going to do?" I stood and reached out for her hand, pulling her up from the bed. "Well, first, you're going to make us a pot of coffee. Then while we drink it, I suppose I had better fill you in on the attack that is going to take place in a few days." "What?" "Oh, Ethan, don't do anything like that. You just think you know Ryan. He'll have you in jail. He has so many of the movers and shakers here in his pocket, he will ruin you if you attack him." "I couldn't stand to have anything happen to you," Allison said. "No, Allison, I don't mean a physical attack. As much as I would love to do that, my friends and I had considered and discarded that option in August. In fact, I believe my attack will be much more painful and devastating to my friend Ryan than any physical pain I could inflict." "August? My God, you've known since August? How did you keep everything so normal for that long? And why didn't you tell me?" "Damn you, I had only suspected since Thanksgiving. Allison, I had to plan my revenge, gather evidence, and I was also trying to figure out a way to protect you. Part of what was bothering me tonight was you and how to break the news to you. You may have copies of all the evidence I have obtained if you want it, but I am afraid things are going to be uncomfortable after the first of the year. I am going to give my children as normal a Christmas as I can. Then I will file the papers after the first of the year. Please don't do anything until the first of the year. I would really like for us to coordinate our actions if you know what you plan to do." "Do? My God, you have to ask? I'm going to divorce the scumsucker and take him for everything I can. Then, after the hurt is over, I guess I am going to try and get on with what is left of my life." Allison and I sat for about an hour discussing our problem. I filled her in on the evidence I had and how I planned to take care of Ryan and Stephanie. She agreed with most of my plans and even made some useful suggestions. I finally decided I should leave before Ryan and Stephanie left the party and he caught us together. I suggested that since we had the cars, Allison should return to the party and pretend she had been there all the time. This would allow her and Ryan to bring Stephanie home as if nothing had happened. As I was leaving through the side door, Allison pulled me to her and gave me a gentle kiss. She cupped my face in her hand and gave me a brave little smile. "Good night, Ethan," she said in a whisper. I never knew when my darling wife returned to our home. I woke up at almost my normal time to find her lying beside me, obviously still intoxicated. My anger seethed within me again, and I rushed from the room, taking my everyday clothing with me to dress in the kitchen while the coffee perked. A month. One more month, and I could begin to repay my wife and friend for the pain they had caused Allison and me. I could hardly restrain myself. I wanted to punish them so badly. Finally, the fateful day arrived, the day of the annual meeting of the shareholders in Ryan's company. We had made arrangements for everyone who had held shares previously to give a proxy to Ryan authorizing him to vote them. We then executed new proxies with a later date authorizing me to vote the shares at the annual meeting. We made sure the new proxies were all dated after the sale date for the shares and before the record date for the meeting. This made the original owner's proxies invalid because they were before the cutoff date for stock ownership and voting authorization. This, of course, meant I could vote all the shares. My friends and I had gathered in the hotel where the meeting was going on. We had agreed I would become president and chief operating officer as well as chairman of the new board of directors. Ryan had not staggered the board terms, so all were elected at each annual meeting. My new board was composed of friends that had purchased stock. Also present was my personal attorney and the county sheriff. The sheriff was to serve divorce papers on Ryan for Allison, as well as to be there if he became violent. We were listening outside the door to the meeting room. When Ryan made the purely formal request for new business, he had not expected any. We opened the doors and filed into the room. "Ethan," Ryan said as I entered with my entourage. "What are you doing?" "We are having a meeting here." "Sorry I'm late, Ryan. I guess I got here just in time." "I heard you calling for new business, didn't I?" Ryan got a strange look on his face, then said, "Well, yes, but this is a stockholder meeting for my company." "I don't think you own stock now, do you?" "Oh, sorry, Ryan. I guess your records might not be too accurate. I personally own approximately 10% of 4 states computer consultants. I also own 51% of Southwest Missouri Holdings, and this corporation owns 64% of 4 states. I'm afraid that means I directly control approximately 73% of 4 states. Now, the new business I want to bring before this board is—" "Whoa, what did you say?" Ryan asked. "No, that's not possible. I have a list here of all owners, and I have their proxies for this meeting. Now, what do you think you were trying to pull here?" As Ryan said that, he sorted through his files, then looked up and grinned as an assistant handed him a book titled Current Shareholders. After he opened the book and started reading the page, his face turned white, then red in anger. "What the hell? I don't know how you managed this, but it is bullshit. What do you think you were pulling here?" I walked to the podium then and picked up the microphone. One of my prospective employees and/or directors was standing beside each of Ryan's by this time. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the gentleman with me and I have held an election, one that is completely in accordance with the bylaws of this company. We have elected a new board of directors. This board has appointed me president of the company, chief operating officer, and chairman of the new board. It is now my duty to inform you that all old board members are dismissed, that you, Ryan, are fired. As you exit this room, there are security personnel outside who will escort you to your former offices to remove your personal possessions. You will all, if employees of this company, receive any severance pay authorized for your position. As for you, Ryan, since no amount is specified, none will be offered." Ryan looked at me and said, "You son of a bitch. I thought you were my friend. I've got a notion to beat the crap out of you." He clenched his fist and started to swing. My attorney, the sheriff, and I both began our respective responses. The sheriff said, "Sir, if you attack this gentleman, I will have to arrest you for assault." I said, "You a-hole. Just try it. I would love to let you get in the first punch so I can use all that army training and beat the shit out of you." My attorney said, "Mr. Adams, please do. I would love to add a lawsuit of assault to the ones we currently have pending against you." Ryan stood there a moment looking shocked, then turned to the attorney. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" "What lawsuits?" "The one to regain some of the corporate funds we believe you used improperly. The one we have filed on behalf of Mr. Mahoney alleging alienation of affection of his wife Stephanie and—" "What the hell?" yelled Ryan. "What the hell do you mean alienation of affection and misuse?" With that, the sheriff stepped forward and handed Ryan a paper that he took automatically. "You have been served," he said. "This is divorce papers from your wife Allison alleging infidelity, a restraining order, and order for you to vacate her home. Also included is the paperwork involving the alienation of affection suit filed by Mr. Mahoney, in which he alleges you systematically worked to alienate his wife from him and citing dates and times you were with her sexually." At this, the murmur building in the background rose to a roar. We turned to see all doors to the meeting room standing wide open and the hallway filled with observers and reporters. I don't know how, but the local paper had been notified of the pending events, and somehow a rumor had started in town that morning that this meeting would be a real event. I got even more pleasure knowing that at this very moment my cheating bitch of a wife was also being served divorce papers. As I was thinking this, my cell phone rang. Sure enough, it was Stephanie. I smiled and answered, "Hello, Steph." "Hey, I'm really busy right now. Can this wait?" "You scumsucker," she screamed. "What is the meaning of this? Divorce? You accuse me of infidelity? I ought. I broke into her conversation and said, Steph, shut up. Go in and watch the DVD in the player, then pack and get out of my house. I'm busy dealing with your friend Ryan right now. I then hung up and turned off my phone. Well, did the paper have a field day? In fact, the story got picked up by national media and was splashed on many business pages nationwide because our company had dealings all over the country. I got many calls from people I had been in the army with, and some of them even told me they had suspected Stephanie was screwing around on me while I was off on duty. I talked to Stephanie one time after the divorce was filed. Like most cheating spouses, she was positive she could use spin control and make me cancel the divorce. We were at the attorney's office, and she made the offer I couldn't refuse. Stephanie said, Ethan, could we please talk about this mess one time? Honey, I know your feelings were hurt, but Ryan just didn't mean anything to me. It was always you I loved. I've loved you from the first time I met you in grade school. Just give me a few minutes, and I will sign the papers if you still want me to. I looked at the two attorneys standing beside us, then at Stephanie. Okay, I said, but I want the attorneys to hear all this, and I want a tape made of the discussion. If you agree to that, I'll listen to you one time. Oh, Ethan, we don't need attorneys for a little talk between us, do we? After all, we used to talk all the time. What's the difference? You know damn well what the difference is, Steph. You might say something or allege I said something that could cause a lot of problems in the divorce. I don't want that, so I want a tape and the attorneys. Take it or leave it. Well, she agreed, and we had our little talk. After we were all seated in the conference room, Stephanie started. Ethan, you're blowing this all out of proportion. I admit I cheated and I am truly sorry, but is that any reason to throw away 25 years of happy married life? Didn't you ever do something while we were separated that you were ashamed of? Ryan kept hitting on me until I succumbed to him. I'm not proud of that, but come on. Is one time in our marriage enough to just throw me to the curb? I looked at her in shock, then replied, No, Steph. If it had been just one time, I might have been able to forgive you, but it wasn't, was it? I have proof of several months of infidelity with Ryan alone. Lord knows how many others there were over the years. How about Leo? Do you care to tell me his last name so I can visit with him about you? Or how about all the men you were with while I was away from home? I had several friends come forward when they found out I had finally caught you and tell me they had known or suspected you cheated while I was away. What about them? Stephanie was shocked at my outburst, then her face got red. She began shouting at me. You a-hole. How dare you? When we were younger, you would just take off and do your duty to your country with no concern for me. You would leave me at home alone to care for the kids and run the house. I had needs too. I needed to be talked to and told how desirable I was. I needed some adult company. I admit I had some male friends while you were gone, but so what? Nothing I did while you were gone cost you a thing. It wasn't like you were pleasing me in bed. Oh, hell no. You had your duty. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't have some damn bar girl too, but I could never find anyone that would admit it to me. All your damn men were too loyal to rat you out. Only twice in our marriage did I take any man into my bed while you were home, and then it didn't cost you anything. I always gave you sex when you wanted it. I never said no, even if I had been with Leo or Ryan. How can you say I wasn't a good wife? I played the good military wife and attended all your parties. I simpered too and agreed with all the wives of your superior officers, even if they were simpering bitches. I supported your career, and now you're just going to dump me because I have a few friends you don't approve of? Well, you can just go to hell. After Stephanie said that, she grabbed the divorce papers, signed them, and thrust them toward the two speechless attorneys. Stephanie looked at all of us, then said, You can just rot in hell. I'm out of here. She stomped from the room and was out of sight before any of us could even speak. A couple of weeks later, Stephanie rented a U-Haul truck and loaded her belongings. The boys say she has moved to a small retirement community in Florida. I haven't seen or talked to her since that day. I fared pretty well in the property settlement. Stephanie was so angry at the meeting she didn't pay much attention to the settlement proposal, and I guess the attorney either wasn't too good or was so shocked at her outburst he didn't bring up how one-sided in my favor it was. Part of the reason for the long time between discovery of her cheating and the filing of the divorce was so I could move and hide assets, but truthfully, I couldn't do much of that. Thankfully, after we retired, Stephanie had not paid too much attention to our finances, so it was easy to make the few changes I had made. She did get half of my pension and half of the brokerage account, but I kept all the property and managed to keep my ownership of Ryan's company too. All in all, I kept over 80% of our assets. Even with the amount I kept in the divorce, Stephanie was able to live a comfortable life, but it was to be a lonesome one. It seemed like her reputation followed her, and whenever she got serious about another man, he found out about her past indiscretions. I am so sorry about that, but, well, heck, wouldn't you want to know everything also? As for the company, My friends and I orchestrated a buyout, taking it private to overhaul the business. With strategic improvements, we eventually took it public again, reaping a massive profit when the stock soared. We brought in top-tier professional management and secured a listing on the NYSE. After that, I stepped down and began a new chapter of my life with my wife. She, by the way, walked away with nearly all of Ryan's company stock in the divorce and became quite wealthy after the public offering. As for Ryan, life hasn't been as kind. Things got so uncomfortable for him here that he eventually packed up and moved about 100 miles away. Now, he manages a small grocery store and rents a one-bedroom apartment in a low-income housing complex. Revenge, it turns out, can be both satisfying and profitable, especially when it involves outsmarting a cheating spouse. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.